thank you all for coming today. And in particular, thanks to our speaker for joining us today. I asked him earlier how he can ever get away. It looks to me like that's an industry that is pretty short in terms of planning time. But he did manage to get away and join us today. I can't see John on the screen at the moment. But if you see him with my name underneath it, just please realize that he's not me and I'm not him today.
Right.
A couple of people suggested to me that we have this program as a part of the series because they said they never get a chance to ask questions of people in this business because the only time they use the business is when someone has died in their family. And I hadn't thought about it, but that sure makes sense. So I put in a call and John Pascalacqua was generous enough to say, yes, he'd make the time and schedule himself in. And so he's with us today. So John, I'll ask you to tell a little more about your background. I happen to know that I haven't been in Benicia that long, but I know that you are a fixture here and that everyone knows of you, which is wonderful for you and for the community. So yeah. I'll turn it over to you and you can share a little more about your time here.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel like I am, or even the mortuary is kind of a fixture here. We've been here, well, if you're going way back, we actually were on First Street near the corner of First and J. My grandfather was partners with a fellow named Mr. Chisholm. So the mortuary used to be Chisholm and Pascalacqua. My grandfather was Frank, and it became, actually next week, March 1st, was our anniversary date. In 1943, it became Pascalacqua Funeral Chapel. Oh. Our location now is at 901 West 2nd Street, which is, if you're an old timer in our community, down the street from the old post office. And like I said, my grandfather built this building in 1950. My dad ran the business from about 1962 until about 1992. And I've been here since, hard to believe, 1977.
Oh my goodness.
So I've actually been doing this for 46 years, which is, if you think about, kind of mind-boggling. It's been here since 1943, and I've been here for more than half of it, which is like, I can't even hardly believe that, but that's in fact true.
Yeah.
1974, we purchased a place in Vallejo called Twin Chapels Mortuary. It's on Tennessee Street between the freeway and Mare Island. And with the trends going, as you know, most people these days, the majority of people these days are being cremated. So I put a crematory on site at that location in Vallejo. So I'm really proud of the fact that when someone passes, once they're in our care, they're in our care until either they're buried or they're cremated and their ashes are either buried or returned to the family or scattered or what have you. So there's, it's just great to have that on site. And with more and more people doing that, it's been great for us. When I got out of high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. My parents were not telling me I'm taking the SAT and I'm going to college, whatever. They just kind of let me go to JC for a few months, and I thinking, what the heck am I doing here? And my dad was like, why don't you just go to mortuary college and you can get your license to be. And if you want to do it at some point, you can, but if you don't want to do it till you're older, that's fine too. So I did that. And then I actually came to work in January of 1977. I've actually been here since. So I honestly really love what I do. 46 years seems like an awful long time to work someplace, but it honestly feels like it's not even been half of that. I've met some incredible people over the years and got to know a lot of people from taking care of their families, and I really, really enjoy the personal aspects of my profession. And I do think it's people sometimes refer to it as a business. It is a business, but it's more than that to me. It's like it's a profession, and it's kind of almost a ministry to help people. And I just love our little community part of so much that I really do feel that this is part of what makes the mortuary is part of what makes our little town here a great place to be, great place to live. So obviously, being in a small town, I've taken care of a lot of people that that have been dear friends of mine. I took care of my grandmothers. I've taken care of my parents. I've countless friends and everything. And everybody's different on how they do things. And nowadays more people are cremated, but because of that, you actually have choices with regards to not exactly how the cremation is done, but things that can be done before. For example, and actually we have a nice website. You're welcome to go on there. There's a general price list there that could spell everything out for you. But basically, I would go over your options, whether if you were thinking about being buried and what your options are, versus if you wanted to be cremated and what your options are. Benicia has two cemeteries. The Benicia City Cemetery, which is off of East 2nd Street. If you were going up East 2nd to get on the freeway, there's a sign that says City Cemetery, but right when you were near McDonald's, you take a left and you go back up into the hill over there. It's a beautiful spot up on top of the hill, beautiful view of Carquinez Straits. That's one cemetery, what's Joyce. The other cemetery is St. Dominic Cemetery, which is on the top of East 5th Street and Hillcrest. So those are the two places that you can be interred if you wanted to do it in Benicia. When someone passes, and it's obviously 24/7, they can call anytime. You call in the middle of the day or the middle of the night when someone passes. And we would go to wherever that person has passed. And then typically the next day, I would sit down with either the spouse or the children or the next of kin, whoever that may be. And we would kind of go over what the wishes were of the person, whether they want to be buried, they want to be cremated. If the person is a veteran, they're entitled to some benefits, including burial at the National Cemetery, actually any national cemetery in the United States. The closest one to us is up in Dixon. It's about 35 minutes from here up Highway 80. And if you're an honorably discharged veteran, you can be buried there and your spouse could be buried there at no charge. Whether you're buried or you're cremated, no charge. If you're cremated, you have the choice at that cemetery to be buried in a niche, which is an above ground place for cremated remains, or you can be buried in the ground, have your urn buried in the ground. Either way, your spouse could be with you in either of those situations. We also, and then of course, if you were going to be buried, we would schedule everything for you. You would, we put the obituary in the paper. We go over certified copies of a death certificate with the family. They're in Solano County, they're very expensive at $26 a piece. And I try to keep that number manageable because a lot of people these days don't require a certified copy. They can sometimes take a copy of that because $26 for a piece of paper is a lot of money in my mind. So, so I would submit the obituary to the newspaper, and I schedule the funerals, help with the burial. I notify Social Security when the death occurs, and we just kind of walk you through start to finish. You never have any pressure to buy anything you don't want or sign up for anything you don't want. You pretty much tell me what you want, how you want it. We make videos nowadays where it's basically a slideshow of, which is really a cool way to celebrate someone's life, I think, especially if the body's not present. I have a big, maybe some of you probably have been here at least once over the years, but we have a big screen television in my chapel, and I usually have a slideshow going, which is an array of pictures that the family gives me. It's a great way to celebrate someone's life. You don't have to have anything set up ahead of time. It does help. You can you could come in here, you could set up an appointment, you come here, we can talk about your choices. You can prepay that if you want it. And you have options in terms of paying it all at one time or over time or monthly, quarterly, but everything could be in place. So all your wishes would be taken care of exactly the way you wanted. If you're a veteran, you could be entitled to some other benefits. You're entitled to a flag on your casket if you're buried. If you're not, we would display it next to your urn. In some cases, if you're a disabled or partially disabled vet, you're entitled to some other benefits. It depends on your degree of disability, but there's definitely some benefits out there. And nowadays, I mentioned a couple choices with regard to cremation. There's what we call an immediate cremation, which is the person passes, we pick the person up, do the cremation usually in about 2, 3, 4 business days, generally at the most. And then we get the ashes back to either the family or bury them, or we can even scatter them out in the bay, in the Carquinez Straits. It's all completely legal. I get you a permit to do it. But that's a immediate cremation. There's a option where you can have what we call a cremation with a memorial service, which is it's a cremation, a direct cremation like that. It does allow for a little bit of viewing of the body by the family members, and then you have a ceremony, or nowadays the word everybody likes to use is a celebration of life. It's the same to me, it's the same exact thing as a memorial service. It's just a new age terminology, but it's really pretty much the same thing. You're honoring that person and their legacy and what they're about. I tell everybody, everybody's day is going to come at some point. And I try to celebrate that person with a memorial service or celebration of life. Everybody's day is going to come. But I think it's important to celebrate and honor that person and turn it into if you can, turn it into somewhat of a positive instead of what people generally would expect to be a sad it is sad when you lose somebody, but you got to turn the legacy and the life of that person into a positive. And I try to do that with everybody I take care of. The other option with cremation, believe it or not, in this day and age, you can rent a casket. You could have a traditional style. Probably everybody here on this screen has been to a service where the body is present, I would think, at some point in their life. So you could do a open casket viewing, whether in a service either at the mortuary here or a church, synagogue, wherever. You rent a casket, helps keep the costs down. You do the cremation after the services are complete, and because I have my own crematory, I can get those ashes to you generally the day after the service. So I know it might sound a little weird about renting a casket, but it is possible these days. The other thing I would tell you is that, everybody has a lot of times people think embalming is required. Embalming is the only time embalming is required is if the body is going to be shipped outside of the United States, or the body is going to be present and viewed for more than 4 hours. It's the only time anybody has to be embalmed. A lot of people think it has to be done. It's matter of fact, we can't do it until we've had permission from a family member to authorize that. So a lot of people think that is required, but it's not. Even if you have a burial, COVID, of course, I'm sure you're probably thinking about COVID, and that certainly had an impact on us and things. Right now, there's no restrictions on. As a matter of fact, they were just lifted. There's no restrictions on the number of people I can have at the mortuary right now. My chapel can hold, according to the fire marshal, 122 people, and but during right now COVID restrictions, there's no limit as to how many people I can have here. It's changed back and forth several times, as you probably are aware. There's one period of time, probably a year ago, when I could only have about 10 people in here from a family, and then it even got bigger, so you could have, I think, 20 or 25. But there's no restrictions currently with regard to COVID. I will tell you this, that people are still not comfortable coming to services because of COVID. I've taken care of several people that I've known really well, and thought, I would have thought there's going to be more people here. It's because people are still not comfortable coming. They're still not comfortable coming to a big gathering indoors like that. So anyway, does anybody have? I mean, I could talk all day about different things and so forth. But does anybody have any questions about anything? Yes, ma'am.
I was hearing about something called an organic burial. What is that? Do you have any knowledge of that, sir?
Is it an organic burial or a green burial?
I guess it's green.
Green burial is there's not a casket involved. There's obviously no embalming involved, but to be a truly green burial, you'd have to go to I believe the nearest cemetery is over in Marin County. There's no embalming, no casket, and the body is just wrapped in a shroud or a very, very simple biodegradable casket and then buried. You can be buried in a biodegradable casket in Benicia. You can be not embalmed and be buried in Benicia. But if you were buried in Benicia, whatever you're buried in goes into a cement or plastic liner at the cemetery. So my part of things would be a green burial, but because you're going to go into a cement liner or a plastic liner at the cemetery in Benicia, then it would no longer be a green burial.
What about Vallejo? Is it allowed in Vallejo?
No.
Okay.
No. No.
So John, if you wanted a green burial, you would need to make arrangements with that organization in Marin. Is that right?
Well, I could take care of the green
You could.
burial part of the funeral,
Uh-huh.
but the cemetery,
Oh.
you'd have to make those arrangements at the cemetery.
Okay.
I could do the funeral part of things,
Right.
and
I see.
and so forth. Yeah,
That's good. That helps me.
yeah.
So
The other,
could you
go ahead.
do you ship the body over to Marin? Is that how-
Yes, we would take the body over there. You know, I'm glad you asked that. Believe it or not, from our little town here in Benicia, we have shipped people all over the world. You would never believe it, but we've shipped body to the Philippines. We've shipped bodies to Portugal and Spain and Greece and Pakistan. Bodies intact. Yep. You'd never believe that from our little town, but that's in fact what we do.
So I
Yes,
heard,
ma'am.
Oops. Okay, Judy, go ahead.
no, that's fine. I have plenty of questions.
Okay. Well, you sort of have answered my question. I used to live in Southern California and I have a plot there with my husband. How do you get me to there?
We actually would drive the body there.
My
Believe
son
it or
said he
not.
would put it in the back of his SUV, but I don't think that
well,
would work.
Well, I don't think you'd want to do that, but
No.
so yeah, we actually would drive. We've actually done that trip many times. The advantage of us driving the body there, like to Southern California, would be it is a long drive, but
Yes.
the cost to drive the body down there would be far less than if you went on an airplane. The reason is if we drove the body all the way to Southern California, we don't have to involve another mortuary. If you flew the body, the body would have to be picked up by a mortuary down there. And so you'd save a lot of money by us driving the body as opposed to flying it.
Okay, so he would have to give you all this information, where I'm going and the mortuary and all that.
Right.
Okay.
So that actually brings up a good point. People do not have to have anything in place. If my phone rang right now, and often it does, and they'd say, Mr. Johnson passed away and this is where he is, I would say, are you ready for us to come? And we would respond right away and go pick that person up 24/7, 365 per year. No extra fee for going in the middle of the night. And we go right away. We go right away.
I appreciate that.
So yeah, so if something happened, you can always call the mortuary. Somebody is on call every minute of every day. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Margaret, do you have other questions, follow up?
Well, no, he's been answering them, so it's okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So John, I thought I heard something about some kind of process that was water-based, an aquatic
Yep.
something? And what is
Yep.
that?
Well, that's where the flesh would be removed with a water system. We don't, that's obviously quite an investment and a very new
Okay.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Our crematory is smoke-free and it's odor-free. You could walk right down the street right next to where that is taking place, and you wouldn't even know. You would have no idea that was even taking place.
Uh-huh.
So we're obviously concerned about the environment, just like everybody. So between these smoke-free and odor-free, I think we're right on top of where we should be, and that the water system is kind of a new thing. I don't know that it's ever going to catch on, because it's quite an investment. It could be very, very expensive to do that, when the cremation, I think, is relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd really like to tell you is, everybody's heard of that famous cremation society that advertises scatter at sea and direct cremation, and then scatter your ashes at sea. We do exactly the same thing at about half the price.
Oh, whoa. Huh.
About half the price. If you called the Neptune Society and asked them what their fees are, tell them what you want. I believe it's about $3,200. You can check my website. We do an immediate cremation for $1,695. So, and you have the ashes scattered right out here in the bay. And you can do that. What's really cool about that, I think anyway, is not everybody's comfortable on a boat, but because our little community here is pretty small, right next to the water and so forth, a lot of people witness the scattering off of 9th Street. There's a buoy out there. That buoy's 800 yards from the coast. The law states I have to be 500 yards off the coast. So that buoy, you could watch from 9th Street and watch your loved one's ashes be scattered. So I think that's pretty cool too. So,
Yeah.
It is, I should say.
Yep.
So that takes me to a question in terms of scattering the ashes. I hear people comment about, I remember my sister telling me one time that a friend of hers died, and this friend ate out every night. And so a bunch of people went and had dinner at the restaurant and scattered her ashes around the restaurant.
Oh.
So I thought I'd heard, is that legal? And what are the laws around scattering ashes?
Oh.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm sure they probably took a very, very small portion,
Yeah.
because there's no way they could have done all of the ashes.
Right.
There's just, that's impossible. But
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, people often ask me how much ashes are there, and the easiest way to do it is, I say it's about the size of a woman's shoebox.
Uh-huh.
That's about how much cremated remains you have.
Uh-huh.
Now, the laws in California with regard to scattering of ashes are, if you are going to do it in the water, you have to be 500 yards off of a coast of navigable waters, meaning you can't do it in Tahoe, because that's a lake. That's different. You got to have, it has to flow basically to the ocean. If you did it on land, you're supposed to have written permission of the property owner, including if it was in a national park or a state park, or on somebody's property. You can divide the ashes, meaning half could be scattered in the water, half could go to another location. As a matter of fact, I offer to if people tell me, you know what, we're just gonna scatter the ashes, I ask them, I said, how many locations are you going to? And they might say, we're gonna do it at 3 different locations. So I would divide the ashes into 3 separate either urns or containers of some kind to help facilitate that scattering, instead of taking one urn and then you kind of pour some out and think, oh, that's about enough. If I set it up to where you can, it just makes the scattering a lot simpler. The other thing nowadays is big is jewelry. Jewelry, meaning you can actually get a diamond made with using some of the ashes, but you can also get jewelry that would you could actually put ashes in, whether it's a necklace or it's a keychain or anything like that. There's lots of choices. That's a lot of people choose to do that nowadays too. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Let's see. I was interested, and I realized I was aware there are 2 cemeteries in Benicia.
Mhm.
So this may sound ridiculous. Are there space if I don't have a plot and I'm interested in being buried or having whatever?
Yes, there is plenty of room.
Oh,
St. Dominic Cemetery, I think, has been around for like 175 years.
uh-huh. Oh
And
my gosh.
almost, they probably have half of the cemetery is not even developed. It's not
Oh,
even used.
okay.
They have plenty.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest with you, the majority of people being cremated nowadays, they're not using grave space. Any of the cemeteries are not using grave space like they used to. So there's plenty.
Oh,
There's plenty
okay.
of grave space. Yeah.
I
Yes.
have other questions. Why don't, Donna, you go on?
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask, I thought you had to be Catholic to be buried there. I guess I'm wrong.
You do not.
Dominic, you don't. Oh, that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Anyone else have
Yeah.
questions? So I'm wondering, I was surprised, John, when I was helping with my sister's burial. I didn't even know about certified copies. Is that what you call it, the death certificate? What on
Yes.
earth are they used for? I mean, I remember them saying, I don't know how many to get. And I thought, I don't know what the purpose is if you have more than one.
Well, some people want an original certified copy and they do not give it back to you. Like a lot of times a retirement account or an investment company, they're gonna want proof that the person passed and they keep that. Nowadays, I try to encourage people to get like 3 or 4. I would sit down and kind of talk about, without getting too personal
Right.
into their business, because that's not my business. Just get an idea of how many you might need. And typically, I would say 4 or 5 is a manageable number.
No, okay.
And then I encourage people to do 2 things. Number one, whenever they go anywhere, DMV or the bank, Social Security, wherever you go, you have this copy with you and you hand it to them and ask them if they can make a copy of it.
Uh-huh.
And then they give you the original back.
Oh,
Most people will do that. And then the other thing I encourage people to do is you can scan a certified copy and attach it to an email. And a lot of people will accept that. A lot of people may not, but at $26 a piece in Solano County and $28 in Contra Costa County for a piece of paper, I try to encourage people to do both of those things and it just help keep the cost down. The other thing is, everybody's had a story of death certificates are hard to get, or I encourage you to get 3 or 4 or 5, or I encourage a family to get that many. I said, and if you run out, you call me. I said, I'll get you. I'm in Fairfield every day. That's where they come from. So I
I
said,
see.
just they're the same cost as if you drove to Fairfield and you got them yourself. I don't charge anything to do that.
Right.
So I would say, just give them the option to always call me and we can get them for
Great.
you.
I appreciate your sensitivity to the cost. So speaking of
Yeah.
costs, can you say, what are the specific kinds of things that add up to the cost of cremation or burial?
Well, I try to simplify everything, not only for me, but for the consumer. If you looked onto my website, I try to package all the different types of services. A little bit ago, we talked about immediate cremation. We talked about cremation with the memorial service, or we talked about a cremation with a viewing and a funeral and renting a casket and so forth.
Mhm.
So I try to package everything together. So if you have an idea what it's going to cost to buy, and everything generally would fall into one of those packages.
I see.
We don't, my general price list, it's frankly 5 pages long because it has to satisfy some guidelines with the state of California.
Right.
If you did look it up, I would encourage you to go to, there's a page with burial options and there's a page with cremation options. And I think, because basically that's your 2 options. And you just find the package that you're thinking of or looking at, and it'll fall into that. But a lot of it's based on really what you do. People call me up and say, well, how much is it going to be for a burial? Well, that's a broad question, because you can have a burial with just a graveside service and no viewing. You could have a traditional funeral where you have 2 days of viewing and you buy a very expensive casket. So it's
Right.
it's an impossible question to answer. This, I will tell you, I can assure you, the cost is fair to me and it's fair to you, which I really think is important. I'm going to be here for a long time. If I take care of your loved one, I might see you at Safeway the next day. And I think it's important that you feel good about what you do and what you spend. And it's a good experience.
Right.
The other thing is you can decide ahead of time what you're thinking about doing. If you knew what you wanted a direct or an immediate cremation and the ashes to see there, or to be buried in a cemetery, whatever, you can prepay that. You don't have to, of course, but you have the option of prepaying that. You could come down here to the mortuary and you could tell me what you want, what you don't want. I want this and I don't want that. And we want different things, and there's going to be a cost obviously associated with that. And you could come down here and you could prepay that. It's all guaranteed. Whenever the time comes, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, it's all guaranteed.
Mhm.
The way that program works is you pay us. That money does not go into an account here at the mortuary. You'd actually purchase a policy, an insurance policy. So you pay today's price. The insurance company has your money until the time comes. That policy grows with inflation over the years. So if it is 10 years down the road, the mortuary accepts whatever that policy is grown into as full payment. So if you think about it, I'm going to make out okay. You're going to make out okay. and the insurance company's going to make out okay. So it's everybody wins,
Yeah.
or it's fair to everybody, I should say.
So you
So
could
it's-
pay for either a burial or a cremation. You could pay for both of them if you chose to. And you
That's
could pay
correct.
on an installment plan, I gather.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes, you can. Yes,
Judy,
ma'am.
can I just say, I don't know if now would be the time. I'd just like to explain what I did with
Sure.
John
Sure.
Passalacqua about 2 years ago, but I can save it till the end. if
Yes,
that's
no,
easy.
no, go right ahead. Thanks,
Okay, so
Donna.
I just want you to, hi, John. I don't know if you remember me, but I came
Yes.
a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And I have to say, I've known his reputation. I've seen him. I never knew him or anything, but it was very pleasurable in every way. He is not hard sell. And we discussed, I was on a very strict budget, and I did choose to be cremated and to buy the policy. That was after you go through a whole bunch of steps of what you want. And his list, there's nothing hidden. It's just like you can't discuss every possible thing. I may do this, you may do that. And you just keep going along. And I didn't even know that that was how it would be done. I figured I'd be giving him the money and he'd just be sitting on it or whatever, investing it. But yeah, it was very neat because I did buy a policy. So that was paid for in full. And so I like the fact that, I may live to be 150. So by then the rates are going to be 5,000. But John's still going to be here and he's not going to want any more money than what I paid. So, it was fun. We laughed just like we're doing now. You're sitting there talking about the inevitable that we're all going to go through and all of that. But it was just lovely. I went away with a very secure feeling. I'm going to have my ashes out in Sassoon. I've lived here so long. I love walking along there, and that's where I'm going to be. And
That's great, Donna.
and I'm just going to I have talked to my family. I don't tell everybody. Nobody wants to hear, oh, by the way, everybody gather around. We're going to, but the people that need to know, hey, I have everything just so planned and nice. And so it'll just be perfect. And it's a wonderful peace of mind. You don't have to worry that, my family loves me so much that they want to spend $20,000 on a big burial. Nothing like that's ever going to happen. And I in no way ever felt, he was so kind and nice, never any pressure for anything that I chose. And it's in black and white. So I just have to commend that process. And it was great. And I have told other people, so it's a nice, secure thing.
Thank you, Donna. That's
Thank
so
you.
great hearing about that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, that's just great.
Yeah.
Let's see for my other questions. I was fascinated that when you said you would, that it's popular today to do a slideshow. Am I understanding that if I walked in with, 15 or 20 pictures, you would in fact put this slideshow together or someone on your staff?
Yes, but I would want a lot more photos than,
Yeah.
because we do like 150 or 200.
Wow. Well,
It's
Wow.
the best. Actually, one of the best things I've ever did, because you're truly celebrating someone's life and legacy. And I make a copy for all the survivors, either the spouse and all the children. It's cool. It's so
Wow.
cool.
That's just
I have a
fabulous.
question, Judy.
Pardon?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So what if I buy a package now and 10 years from now, I'm being positive, 10 years from now, my husband dies and I move up to Oregon to stay with my brother. Does that follow me or how does that work?
Good question.
So this policy would cover whatever you set up. And I assume you're probably talking about some form of cremation, probably an immediate cremation.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have a policy that's worth X amount. If I do it here, it's 100% guaranteed. If you move to Oregon, what I would recommend doing is going into the mortuary locally there, and show them what you have, and you could transfer it from here to there. They'd be crazy not to accept it because they'd be basically turning down business. I mean, if you set up something in Oregon and moved here and passed, I can tell you that I would honor what you have in that policy. A couple other things I would tell you is nowadays, if you were, let's say your previous generation was buried, which was more often the case in the previous generation, more people were cremated.
Right.
I mean, were buried.
Buried.
Sorry. So nowadays, going towards cremation, most cemeteries would allow your ashes to be placed on an existing grave. The National Cemetery would not. But let's say somebody in your family was buried in a cemetery in, well, even Southern California, like you mentioned earlier, you could bury the ashes on an existing grave. Most cemeteries would allow you to do that. Just food for thought, but that's something you could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm the one that has the plot in Newport Beach, if I was cremated, then I could be put in that plot that I already bought.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And you know, this is sort of funny, but not. I have a dog that was cremated that I wanted buried with me. Does that work?
I get that question a lot. It's
Okay.
amazing how many times I get that
I'm
question.
sure. Yeah.
It's a tough question for me to answer at the same time because there's a legal side of things that I don't think the cemetery would allow that. But I can probably assure you that somebody's given me a box at some point and asked me if I would do it and not told me what was in the box. They just wanted this box to be buried with their loved one.
Oh, that's sweet.
So,
Okay.
you know, I'm a
Yeah,
human being and I have dogs myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Margaret, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Yeah.
Like, I can't.
Well, he got me
can't.
from Newport Beach
Yeah.
to here, and so he's very special. So, okay, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I can imagine you get that question, John.
Oh, I yesterday I got it. Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah. Honestly, I get it a lot. Yeah.
So one of the reasons we're holding this program and others in our end of life series is to help people be informed and prepared. So I wonder, in the people you encounter when they're coming in, when a loved one has died, or yes, are most people somewhat prepared? Have they thought this through? Or are they coming to you saying, help?
Well, I think on one hand, they're certainly coming for help might not be the right word,
Yes.
but for some guidance. I think is, but at the same time, you know, people die of any age. So obviously, if it was somebody in their 40s,
Right.
their reaction and their family's reaction would be different than if it was someone that was maybe 85 and kind of getting towards what they thought would be the end. So I think that the most important thing is to do, I always, if there's any indecision about what to do and how to do it, I always say, what would the person that passed want you to do?
Yeah.
If he was here right now, if he or she was here right now and they had a chance to say what would they how would they answer that question? So that kind of helps narrow it down. And
Yes, that makes sense. That was actually going to be my next question about what do you advise people in general? Are there are there mistakes that people make that you see consistently? These questions might not be relevant. I just I put them down earlier.
well, I think it's important. Certainly, I think it's important that your children know what to do when the time comes. And and believe me, that's an uncomfortable conversation to have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you really want it to be taken care of that way, it would be best to make sure they did it.
Yeah.
Or you told them.
Mm-hmm.
If you really, really, really wanted to make sure it happened, then you would come down here and pre-plan it, prepay it, and then tell them what you did.
Yes.
Because at that point, it's a contract that I have to fulfill. They wouldn't be able to change it. Like if you said you wanted to be, somebody earlier said they wanted to be buried in Southern California. Well, if they came in and prepaid and pre-planned all that, and then they passed, their kids, the law states in California nowadays, the kids can't come in here and, well, you know what? She told me she wanted to be cremated. So I have to, if it's a prepaid, pre-planned agreement with me and the person, I have to do that. Like that, the family can't change that.
Right.
So if you wanted to make sure it was carried out the way you want, I would think about pre-planning and prepaying it.
That's great. Do you ever have anything to do with, or do you end up with people who want to donate their body to science?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, just one day this week, somebody had passed and they wanted to do that. That they're not, the schools, there's one in San Francisco, one in Davis. They're not accepting bodies like they used to. I don't know if they have enough, or they're being more selective about who they accept. They just don't take everybody.
Interesting.
So,
yeah. I'm glad to know. I made arrangements for that, a decade or so ago. I didn't know that they were getting more discriminating, John.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep. And then, they have the body. I don't know how long. And then at some point, I think they do return the body after cremation to you. I'm not sure how long that takes.
Mm-hmm.
So that, in my mind, you would be almost revisiting the whole thing.
I should say.
Again.
Yeah.
It's just frankly a lot like COVID, I think. In this past couple years, people, they couldn't get together because of COVID. They weren't doing services, and then they're think, well, you know what, we'll do it. Well, initially they were like, when this first all started in February or March, they would say, well, yeah, well, you know what, we were kind of it was all new to everybody. A lot of people thought, well, it'll be over in just a couple of months. We can do something. Well, here it is 2+ years later, and we're still where we are. So a lot of people thought, well, you know what, we'll have a service after this is all over.
Right.
But the problem is now that window for a lot of people is closed, and they've kind of moved on.
Yeah.
They just don't want to. They just don't want to go through it again.
Sure.
So completely understandable.
Yes, I should say.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Jean.
my driver's license, I think it is, I have a little sticker, a pink thing or whatever, dot, and it says that is supposed to indicate that I want to donate my eyes or I want to donate some part of my body.
Right.
Yeah, how does that work?
So if a death occurs in a hospital,
Ah,
the hospital has to notify, or they have to ask you if you want to donate your organs or
okay,
you want to be an organ donor.
okay,
That's on your driver's license. So I'd imagine you do want to be. So then the hospital would help facilitate that.
okay,
If the death occurred at home and that would have to be relayed to us in some fashion because we typically would not see your driver's license, for example. So that would have to be relayed to us that you are an organ donor. And then we have a couple different places that we can call to help make that happen.
okay, very good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So John, when you say we'd have to get information to you, does that mean if I was a family member of Jean's, for example, that we'd want to make sure that, or I would want to communicate that to you?
So somehow either the hospital or we need to
Okay,
be
Get the-
made aware that there's to be a donation.
okay. So once again,
We can help facilitate that, but somehow that has to be conveyed to us.
right. So again,
Yeah.
smart that our kids know about
Yes,
our preferences, and that would be
Right.
one of them.
and
Right.
it would be very good to have that in writing, those preferences.
Yes, I should say,
Yep,
yeah,
Yeah, I think verbally, I think with your children would be probably even more effective than something in writing, because if it's in writing, where is it going to be in writing? And we're going to
Okay.
need to get our hands on that sooner than later. So if it was in a wallet in the drawer behind the desk or something like that, we're not going to see it. Your family's not going to see it until it's possibly too late or other arrangements have been made. So I would convey it personally. I would convey it to spouse if you have one, and children if you have them. So everybody's in the know, so they can make it happen.
so there are many people who recommend today having a when I die file. So for example, I have a when I die file that everything is going in there that has any kind of relevance. So I actually have my certificate from the University of California at San Francisco, a copy of it in there. I have the original in a, what do you call it, a sealed box, fireproof box.
Yeah.
But I have a copy in my when I die file. So
Okay.
the when I die file, it can be really important if you really get as many of your documents in there as possible, and the kids know that's where you go to learn about anything.
That's the key right there. That's where the kids need to go.
Yeah.
They need to know it's
Right.
there.
Yeah,
And they need how to get access to it.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
when you told them that, they're not going to be comfortable hearing that, but they'll be grateful that you told them
yeah.
when the time comes.
Well, actually, for all those of you who are here, after the first session, I think, we sent you by email something called the Conversation Project. It is a project out of a healthcare organization in Washington, D.C. And it really can help deal with what John is talking about, the uncomfortable conversations that come up around death. And so I have walked through that whole thing with my daughter, Pam, and it alerted us to all kinds of questions that I'm glad that we were able to discuss. Anyone else have other questions? Well, if not, John, thank you so
Judy.
very much. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
Hi.
Constance?
Hi.
John, don't I know you as Sherman or Sherm?
Yeah,
That's
you
not
know
my
what?
question,
Sorry,
though.
I meant to say that earlier. My name is John. If you call my office here, my name is John. I also have a nickname that's Sherman that actually goes back to when I was just probably in the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade, and it stuck with me to this day. A lot of people don't even know my name is John, and a lot of people never even heard my other name is Sherman, but John and Sherman is one, in fact, the same guy. He's the guy that's me right there.
Okay.
So,
Well, Sherm,
yeah, that's it. I've had that nickname for a long, long time.
well, I must say that I'm a very happy client of Sherb and the funeral home here in Benicia. I walked my Scotties past it for so many years that I almost, it's like a second home. You know, it'll be a nice place, a launch pad for me at some point in time.
Nice.
The question I have is the death certificate and coroner's report one thing? I mean, when somebody dies, I mean, I know when my mom and my sister and my dad died, I called the funeral home and they made the arrangements. And I think from there, it became, the coroner's report was part of the death certificate. Is that right? Am I remembering that?
Well, the coroner's report would only be valid or used if it was actually a coroner's case.
Okay.
A coroner's case would mean, to become a coroner's case, there's a lot of criteria, but I haven't been to the doctor in more than 3 weeks. The person passed as a result of an accident or a homicide or suicide. There's several accident, an unattended death. So there's several ways to be reported to the coroner. Not everybody is, in fact, that's a very small portion of people are actually coroner's cases.
Would you handle that?
If there's a coroner's report, I cannot get that for the family. That's between the family and the coroner's office. And there's a coroner's office in every county: Contra Costa County, Solano County, Napa County, Marin. Everybody's got their own coroner's office. But there's only a coroner's report done on a coroner's case.
Okay.
And frankly, usually a death certificate is going to answer all your questions, because the death certificate has a cause of death on there.
Right.
And that's going to be enough. The coroner's report or the report of an autopsy, frankly, I wouldn't advise reading that for anybody in your family, because it's quite detailed. And I don't know that you need to read that. The death certificate's going to answer all your questions with regard to the causes and the circumstances.
Isn't it pretty expensive too for an autopsy?
A private autopsy is very expensive. I just had a friend of mine pass, and their child was asking about an autopsy, and the coroner's office is not going to. If there's a doctor that'll sign a death certificate stating why the person passed, there's no need for an autopsy. So if you want one done, you have to do it privately, meaning you have to pay for it. They're very expensive. They're probably every bit of $4,000 for a complete autopsy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're not guaranteed that you're going to get the answer you're looking for. Just because you do an autopsy, that's not going to answer all your questions. This person I just took care of, they have a history of heart issues. So the doctor put on the death certificate that it was heart related. They don't exactly remember the exact cause, but heart related. So even if they did an autopsy, they may not get the answer they want. And if they, in that situation, they're just going to confirm that it was probably some sort of heart issue. So just, to me, it seems like an awful lot of money to go to get basically the same answer. If it warranted an autopsy in the eyes of the coroner's office, then they do it. But it's very expensive. So I don't know if you'd be totally satisfied with everything, with the result.
Once again, I appreciate your sensitivity to cost, John.
Yeah.
How about anyone else? Anyone have a lingering question? Okay. Well, John, I've certainly learned a lot.
I did.
So did I.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
answering the questions.
Yes, thank you so very much.
Thank you. I'll tell you what, thank you so much for having me. I obviously I love what I'm doing. I love talking about it. And there's a lot of a lot of people don't like talking about it at all. And they leave the room if they start talking about it in some ways. But early on, somebody said, pretty much that they didn't want to really talk about it, or what's interesting is, like if I'm at a cocktail party, lots of people want to talk about it. But not day in, day out. And then kind of
That's
funny.
great. Okay.
All
Thanks to everyone for coming. We have
Thank
an
you.
attorney
Thank you.
coming next week.
It was
Okay.
fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.